Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Literary Lore. Today we'll be checking out one of my favorite pieces of propaganda, The Charge of the Light Brigade. Now, don't balk at the term propaganda. It's not always a bad thing. You see, the 20 or so cop shows running concurrently on TV could be considered propaganda, but let's lay down some definitions before we charge into battle. By the way, as usual, the link to this poem is in the description. This was actually a really difficult episode for me to make, mainly because when dealing with propaganda, I wanted to make sure that what I was saying did not have its own biases, which is inherently extremely difficult to do. It took me a little bit longer to get this one done as a result, but after going through it, I kind of cut down a lot of the stuff that was going one way or the other and just tried to stick to what was true about these particular things. So let's first start off with Alfred Lord Tennyson, who is the writer of this poem. That's right, his name actually has Lord in it. He is a Lord. And well, one of the fun things about that guy is that we are 1 day and 195 years apart from sharing a birthday. Now, much like Robert Frost, he was a poet laureate, but he was poet laureate for the United Kingdom. The UK, of course, the UK, and it had some heavy hitters, and they held out basically until they died, usually, when it came to being poet laureate there, as opposed to every year switching it up. You see, to become poet laureate there, he had to receive distinction only after proving essentially his worth in the public sphere. The poet laureate had the job of writing poetry for the crown, not like a normal commission or gift scenario, but literally writing essentially as the voice of the crown. And so they would release their poetry and their works as propaganda. Now, propaganda is not just Benoit Blanc looking at something closely. No, propaganda is a systematic dissemination of information or disinformation to sway public opinion. It is inherently biased, though not specifically bigoted. I say this because when I think of propaganda, I think of stories like 1984, or the historical atrocities of the Nazis, or the current atrocities of present-day America. But everybody uses propaganda to some capacity. Even facts are used in propaganda. If I give you a series of statistics, even ones backed up by real research, I'm usually trying to convince you of a specific stance. That means I've just shown you propaganda. Now, one of the key parts to properly ingesting propaganda is to determine what it is they want you to feel versus what the driest, purest truth of what they're describing is. I mention all of this because, as I mentioned at the start of this video, the poem is propaganda. In the midst of the Crimean War, the UK had sent light cavalry against Russian forces in the Battle of Balaclava. Do not run into an hour-long video just talking about the war. The basics are that the British forces had received outdated, inaccurate info. Cavalry, for those unaware, are lightly armored troops on horseback. They're great for rushing in and cutting down forces with their swords that don't have heavy ordnances and are usually retreating. So 607 strong, these guys, they charge into a valley that was not only prepared for them, but set up with cannons lining inward. The cannons were poised on the left and the right and directly in front of them. Despite this, they charged through and lost 2/3 of their forces after the dust settled. They dealt a ton of damage despite being at a disadvantage on the weapon triangle. But it would be difficult to spin this charge as anything other than a blunder. Unless you're Alfred Lord Tennyson. So according to his grandson, Tennyson actually read this account of what transpired, the actual historical events, and then he wrote the poem in a matter of minutes. The poem spread not only throughout the country, but into Crimea to the troops themselves. So now that we have an idea of the history that inspired this poem, let's charge right into it. Half a league onward, all in the Valley of Death. Row the 600, forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said, into the Valley of Death, row the 600. The poem opens immediately in the middle of the action in media res, the 600 charging into the Valley of Death with a mission to charge for the guns. The Valley of Death could be a shortened version of the biblical Valley of the Shadow of Death in Psalm 23:4, or a direct commentary on the battlefield itself, an area steeped in death. But let's continue. moving from the setting into the hearts and minds of the brave 600.
For the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600.
Tennyson presents a question: what does a soldier feel entering the jaws of death? His response is patriotic and somewhat hand-wavy, because, a good soldier follows orders. They don't question the command. They simply do what they're told, to the point of death. This is one of those lines where we can look at it in one of two ways. One is the propaganda side of things. It says that regardless of what they're told, these soldiers signed up to serve the crown and must serve it exactly as told, to the point of death. The other interpretation is to see the futility of this moment. Someone else had blundered. They had made a mistake, and 600 lives were needlessly, recklessly put at risk. There's no glory in that. There's only a careless superior throwing away human lives. Now, 600 may not seem like a lot in the grand scheme, but think of 600 people and consider that impact.
Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them. Volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600.
I always enjoyed reading this poem in my classes because it lends itself so well to dramatic reading, but at this point I want to point out the rhyme scheme, or rather lack of rhyme scheme. There are slant rhymes such as thundered and hundred, and there are several lines that rhyme in succession. But despite the lack of a true scheme, there's still substantial structure thanks to repetition. I'm sure you've noticed the repetition of certain words, and as we progress through the poem, we'll see even further more complex uses of repetition. Death and the 600 have been repeated in the last few lines, with hell introduced in this last stanza. One could say that this rhythm fits with the constant gallop of the horses as they venture into the battle. Without going into detail, the visual of them charging to battle while the guns fire ensures the horrid losses they are about to incur.
Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600.
So despite being at a disadvantage, the brigade take out their swords and cut down the gunners. They achieve a mythical status in this moment, inspiring the world. They break the line and succeed in dealing a sizable blow to the enemy, and then they dash out retreating. Despite the valor of these cavalrymen, it does note that they don't all make it back. As they retreat, note the parallels between the following stanza and their initial entrance into the Valley of Death.
Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them, left of 600.
This stanza mirrors the third stanza, with the first 5 lines repeating verbatim with a single exception. Now the cannons are behind them as they flee. They continue to fire on them as they heroically retreat.
When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made! All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade, noble 600.
Sixth stanza, a little bit shorter, but it helps to again keep up the repetition and present a stanza for each 100 members of the Light Brigade. The emphasis on their glory, bravery, and honor persists till the end. Now, this is a fairly straightforward poem. It honors the memory of people dying for their country. It presents a fairly unanimous impression of these heroes, but the part that fascinates me is the structure of this poem. It has a sense of movement, entering the battle and fleeing it, that are somewhat uncommon in poetry. The mobility of the narrative is what drives the action and compels the reader. As a propaganda piece, it is especially effective in painting the blunder as heroism distilled. But as I just said, it was a blunder. Tennyson wrote as much. Even in this piece, he points out that they had been given bad orders. The poem does not glorify the mistakes of the government, yet remains respectful of those that gave their lives. Even in this respect, it does gently critique the soldiers for blindly following orders that would get them killed. Now, I don't have a really big twist here for you. I just wanted to share this poem because it's a legitimately fun read. But to reiterate, Just so it's clear, the purpose of this poem was to convince people to continue fighting a war, even if those in power were sending them to their death. Next time you see something presenting a narrative, consider what message you are being fed. What is it the person behind the screen is trying to make you do, think? Next week, we'll be taking a look at a poem by Emily Dickinson and her interesting parlay with death. Thank you for watching, as always, and until next time, Carpe Diem.